Welcome to Professionals and Coffee, a volunteer collective that boasts the professional profiles of public relations practitioners through virtual coffee chats. My name is Carolina Sanilinas, and I'm founder and project manager of Professionals and Coffee. And today I'm so excited to have Daniel Torchia, managing director and partner of Torchia Communications. Daniel is a public relations consultant committed to helping organizations integrate sound strategies into their corporate, management, and marketing functions. Daniel has two personal and professional goals. At the micro level, it is to provide the best service to his clients and help people understand PR's value. And that is to be a good person to serve others. Welcome to Professionals and Coffee, Daniel.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Okay, thank you. So now I'm going to ask you my first questions. I would like to ask you about your personal and family experiences that led you to enter the world of PR, communications, and business. Can you tell me how Torchia Communication was born and how you became the managing director of this agency?
Yes. So, I think one of the best ways and one of the most long-standing and tested and true ways into a career is through your network, through who you know, through who you've admired over the years, and the relationships with that you've built over the years. And for me, my portal or entrance into public relations was through my father. So a very close person. And we admired my father. We watched him work from approximately when we were born, really, all the way up until 2004 when he retired. And so I got to see what public relations was from a certain point of view, from his point of view. And then I slowly got my entrance and my feet wet in the business through my father.
Okay, yeah, that sounds very exciting, and it must be a really reliable relationship between your clients and your family. I really admire that. My second question is, sometimes people misunderstand or have trouble understanding our profession, so PR. And can you explain your thoughts on the topic? I heard you spend a portion of your career on this topic.
Yes, well, because when I grew up, working with my father part-time, summertime, and then more full-time as of 1999, I saw that, Paul practiced PR differently than Faye, and Faye practiced very differently than Beverly, and Beverly was very different in her view of PR than Sid and Guy and others. And so I really was intrigued by what is public relations. And I quickly learned in my career that there is probably a way too broad understanding of PR to the point where it's completely misunderstood and a cacophony, an excessive medley of variances and divergence on what PR is. And so I decided to really learn and study PR, and I started consuming every kind of textbook, kind of like the textbooks behind you, Carolina, on public relations, until I finally stumbled on my PR mentor, which is James E. Grunig. He's my favorite academic, and I studied James Grunig's definition of PR. And it served me very well. And then I quickly saw that the Canadian Public Relations Society was looking into defining PR once and for all with Dr. Terry Flynn. And then I learned about, the PRSA, which is the Public Relations Society of America, and that they had worked to define PR. So I really got interested in what is public relations. And then when I honed in on that, I fell in love with that definition.
Yeah, and yes, is sometimes people, as you mentioned, misunderstood, or they confuse PR with marketing, And sometimes right now, these two concepts, or even in workplace, they use this concept as an external as the same as synonym, but they are different. PR is more like build relationships, while marketing is more to sell ideas, or to sell a product or sell a service. Your company states that you offer services in PR, architecture, service, and program management. What do you mean by PR architecture?
Yeah, because our clients and many people in business or in leadership or government, they ask all the time, like, how can I build my PR department? Should I hire a bunch of people? Should I hire journalists? Should I outsource? Should I do a mixed model? Do I need to hire an agency on retainer, on hourly, on project? Do I start PR and shut down PR? Is PR within marketing? Is PR a part of human resources, or is it a corporate function going into the management? So I think that because we've determined our vision of PR, which is an established vision of PR, like I said, Brewing, we feel very comfortable telling clients and advising them on what a good public relations department should look like. So it really can live in marketing, but it shouldn't only live in marketing. It really can be funded by human resources, perhaps, or the leadership budget, but it shouldn't only be in those departments either. Ideally, public relations is a very high level function, ideally its own department that works with every other function of the business, from employee relations or HR to sales to production and operations, perhaps stakeholder or external or government relations, and oversees all that. And there's three realms to PR. One is the behavioral approach to PR, like what are we doing as a company in terms of literally our production, our distribution, our labor policies, our senior leadership. What are we doing as a business? Our actions. That is part of the PR remit, in my opinion. And then how are we communicating our messages, overseeing all messages? And then lastly is listening. Are we listening really well to feedback and touch points from all important audience groups? So as you see, it is a little bit of message massaging, like I say. It is a little bit of listening, and that's empirical and quantitative studies and qualitative on listening and feedback from the field. And then it is a little bit of what I call corporate coaching, kind of like life coaching, but for the corporation.
Okay. And so it's a mix, and we need to keep everything in mind, because sometimes there are some agencies or some companies that don't listen to the clients, and it's really important, the three components, as you mentioned. Daniel, you have over 25 years of experience and working with a wide diversity of industries, size, and backgrounds. Which do you consider is the most challenging, and which is the most for you?
Well, I really, because I've fallen in love with public relations, I find that it's allowed me to go into any industry with enthusiasm. So because I don't like or have love or appreciation for every industry equally. No, absolutely true. And I would say that my inclination is for, well, I love food. So I just love food. So anything that's food related has me interested. I love tennis, and we're blessed to work with tennis. I really like existential, spiritual topics. In my personal life, I like the study of faith, and so I'm very grateful that we have clients in the faith. We have clients in sports or tennis, and we have clients in, tennis is a sport I used to play. And then we have clients in food service, and then beyond. So those are my favorite, I would say. I've always liked marketing, so I'm comfortable with with brands that are in wholesome categories like ice cream, or pizza. But I guess those are food. Like those are big brands. We work with Baskin Robbins, and we work with Pizza Nova. So I do very much enjoy working with big brands as well.
My next question is, you claim to be a PR missionary versus mercenary. Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, well, I think that I really care about the future of humanity, and I know most people do, if not all. And I think that if we want to build long-standing, peaceful, harmonious civilizations and societies, well, I'm based on my experience and my gray hair or lack of hair, I could tell you one of the drivers of a wholesome, harmonious, and peaceful world or society is ethical, caring, sincere communications consultants. Like, we need that. Because if we don't have that, which I may talk extreme, sometimes I'm a little extreme in my examples, but on one hand of the PR spectrum is a Mother Teresa-like practitioner, someone who's loving, who is so generous. Think of Betty White from Golden Girls, who was she wouldn't harm a fly. And she would, somebody who's so altruistic and generous. I mean, that is giving good counsel. That's a nice extreme of PR counsel, but then there's the other opposite of public relations, the worst, which would effectively be propaganda, usually employed by, I'm going to use my kids watch TV, like evil, mischievous, villains in like movies, where it becomes propaganda and hate, and that exists, and you'd find that probably in a radical, violent group. You can name the one you want. There's many violent radical groups on the planet. Well, they have propaganda / public relations people. I'm embarrassed to say, but so did evil governments, whether it's Nazi Germany, whether it's, I don't know what Franco and the Spanish regime did versus the others, versus currently, there's war in Ukraine, there's Russia, there's Cuba, there's the division in Canada, division in the United States of America. I mean, there are ill-intentioned PR people, and some of them are only out for a buck. Now, not many, gratefully, but some PR people, clearly the ones who are working in the mercenary field of evil and division and violence, well, they're not interested in building bridges. They're not really interested in harmony and compromise. By the way, these are key terms from definition of PR, and Dr. Flynn in Canada and Grunig would talk about, compromise, working towards a good societal end. Those people on the propaganda side, they're not out for that. They're out to we're all adults here, screw you and the consumer or the stakeholder by lies, misinformation, and an end that is probably beneficial for their own group, correct? So you see how, for a good society, we need proper PR people loaded with conscience and loaded with courage to struggle or fight against very ill-intentioned decisions. And the decision or the choice could be to lie, could be to fudge numbers. White collar fraud is very rampant, or it could be to have a disequilibrium between labor and wages and treatment of employees, or pollution, or misogyny, treatment of different groups, minority groups. And you see how that creates asymmetrical communications. That's a term from Grunig, which means relationships where there's a lord and a servant. You know what I mean? There's a powerful person, the powers that be, and the pawns. And, it's no surprise that happens in our world. So PR people need to see how that you could see that I'm using the word missionaries or agents for positive change. But if PR people are only going for the money, if PR people are only going for a good gig, if PR people are kind of putting on their blinders on, like hear no evil, see no evil, I don't know what they're doing, and I'm going to just work on my job and be blind. That's the kind of lackluster, mediocre PR that is only going to lead to bad things. So I'm grateful that we don't want to tolerate that. We want to fight for proper PR, which leads to sustainable business and sustainable relationships.
Yeah, because sometimes also this is related with fake news also. They can advocate fake news or something, and they can generate a certain topic or so that people believe about that and completely is wrong. Yeah, I totally agree with you.
So fake news is it's funny because I often say that every 5 years, the PR profession at the outside, from an outside perspective, it seems to change every 5 years, but deep down inside, proper public relations doesn't change that much. There's solid architectural principles, hence the use of the word architecture. And one of them is fake news is a new term. But before, it was propaganda. Before it was disinformation or misinformation or lies or spinning, if you remember that term. And so the reality is that someone who's out to not necessarily be sincere and not necessarily be honest, and is someone who's not willing to compromise, is going to do spinning, fake news, disinformation, but they'll also do, smoke and mirrors, like pump all this fake news or superficial news and hide the real news. So it's or some organizations are gifted at not letting the external media or the external advocacy group ever discover truth. So that's called kind of like, what's the word when you block someone, like impeding access to information is another strategy. These are all PR strategies. And nobody should be gullible or naive to think these are modern strategies. These are strategies that have existed for close to 100 years. So it's PR. Sadly, it's the territory of PR to fight against misinformation and to get to the truth and to have dialogue and have open conversations.
Yeah. Okay. Yes. That is really important nowadays. More. I also read on your website about centric translations. How was it and how was born and when and what is centric translations?
Yes, so public relations agencies like ours we write a lot, we produce a lot of content, and over the years, as a public relations agency based in, our head office is in Montreal, and Montreal is, as you know, a market where language plurality or diversity is very important. French is the primary language of business in Montreal and Quebec, but English is almost equal, or certainly on the global scale, English is essential. And then you have, like, Canada and Montreal being diverse markets, you have other languages like Spanish, like Chinese, different dialects of Chinese, Arabic, Portuguese, Greek. And so this language has always been very important to us. So many, many years ago, maybe 10, maybe 15, a client of ours in the tire manufacturing business noticed that we were outputting press releases equally well, equally effective in English and in French, using Canadian press standards, CP, AP, equally in French and English. And so they said, well, you guys are writing for us quite well in French and English. Can you take on our translations? And so from that day, we decided to say yes. And it was an important yes. And then it just snowballed into more yeses for other clients. And so today, Torchia has a division called Centric Translations, and we're just grateful to be able to do what we do best, which is write a journalistic story, and sometimes a non-journalistic story, sometimes a marketing story, sometimes an administration or operations translations assignment. in multiple languages.
Okay. Thank you for that important fact. What Torchia Communications stands out from the rest of PR and communication agencies, Daniel?
Well, I think my experience in talking to people would say that our differentiators would be that we come in always with a 360-degree perspective, a holistic. We're a holistic partner, so we come in with, even though someone hires us for a crisis, or hires us for a writing assignment, or hires us for a launch, or a media relations assignment, influencer, social media, it doesn't matter what our entrance is. We always ask questions that relate to all the other audience groups of the organization. So we come in with one assignment, but we take a very diverse and 360 approach. And that usually is a little bit surprising when the client sees that they are getting more than they asked for.
Mhm.
But they usually welcome that inquiry, that foray into other stakeholder groups or areas of the business, and then they listen to us. And then if they don't have a sophisticated or well-structured PR department, we know it right away. And so we kind of walk with them to what we call our goal is to give them a fully functional, fully flourishing PR communications department. But to get there would take 5, 6, 7, 10 years. So once we talk about this with them, they either like it or they don't like it at all. But when they like it, we're kind of in for the long term, which is a very good thing for our agency. So I would say that number one is the 360-degree perspective to counsel. The other thing is that we always provide senior counsel in our teams. So like if myself or my brother bring in a new account, well, we don't just send that account to servicing. We service the account with our hours as well. And so we're always involved. So it's very integrated. And then I think that that we care a lot about reporting. We care about listening. And that seems to hit a strong chord with clients. And clients do like, by the way, clients love journalistic writing. So we're pretty rigorous on our standards for journalistic writing. And we find that writing journalistically is not just good for media and news releases. It works also with social media. It works also with internal documents. People are used to reading a journalistic written document, even if it's not just for journalists.
It sounds that it's very complete, your agency, and I love to hear that. What would be your best advice to someone interested in entering the corporate world?
Well, so I'm going to start by saying any world, any business, any job or career, I really think it's very important to network. I can't stress networking, and I don't just mean networking at the public relations, chapter or the marketing chapter. I think it's very important to network in the grocery store, network at your place of worship. If you go to a place of worship, at the library, on the subway, on the street corner. I'm a big fan of those serendipitous moments where you meet someone, and if you have a proper disposition, a proper attitude, good manners, and if you ask questions, so active listening, that's a recipe for success. So that's number one. Number two is, I love it when people take notes. I mean, I notice it's not just me, but many, many employers love it when people take notes. So I often leave meetings with executives and they say either, "Oh, that person took good notes," or "That person didn't take notes. Did you see Danny? He didn't take any notes. What's up?" It's so important, the perception that you're taking notes. And the other thing, so those are two pieces of advice I would give. And the other is, certainly in PR, I would say read Grunig, read more text from the Canadian Public Relations site, from the PRSA. I love Tactics magazine in PR. Those things show that you're really interested. Now, in terms of corporate positions, I would say, get to know the industry that you're interested in. If you're interested in fashion, really get to know it. Watch who's doing what, and study their PR departments. Which organization has a newsroom? Which organization is just issuing poorly written marketing only releases, or are they using APCP style? Which one is doing interviews? Which one is not? Which one has good spokespersons? Which one's not? So I think this one it's always important to audit or assess the industries in which you're in, and then persevere. Give your ideas freely. Pitch ideas. Follow up, and never misconstrue silence for non-communications. Like, just because you're not getting feedback doesn't mean the person is not listening. Persevere. Send multiple emails. Only stop when they tell you to stop.
Yeah.
I mean, as long as you're polite and as long as you're brief.
Yes. No, thank you. Thank you so much for all these pieces of advice. Believe me, are really important. And I will take all of them into consideration. Finally, anything else that you would like to add to this coffee chat, Daniel?
Yeah, well, I think that public relations is such an important field for a solid, healthy society. And we're not really living and enjoying the fruits of a solid, healthy, pluralistic and harmonious society. We're just not. I'm in the US right now, through Zoom, and there's a lot of issues and societal ills in the US. Same thing in Canada. I feel like COVID has, divided some groups. So I think we need to multiply ethical, courageous PR people with conviction. And you can only have conviction when you feel like you know what you're talking about. Meaning you can only have conviction when you're well-read, when you've discerned the topic. Otherwise, forget it. It's like you're going to be blowing with the wind wherever the wind takes you. So I think PR people, we need to multiply, but holding hard, clinging to PR as a proper theory, as a proper profession. And then we can get jobs, and we need to get jobs in corporate America, corporate Canada, in the government, in municipalities, in institutions, and so that everyone can listen to the other, respect the other, and then work out long-term strategies for mutual sustainability so that people can support you. PR, public relations, is the management function that helps an organization to maintain its relationships with those who can sustain the business and to manage relationships with those who can hinder the business. We want to maximize relationships with those who can help us. We want to maximize a relationship with those who can hinder us. Well, that's predicated on dialogue. That's predicated on respect. Otherwise, we're dealing in chaos, and that leads to violence and misinformation. And violence can be verbal abuse. Violence could be disengagement. It might not be violence, but it's more of disengagement. And then that leads to bitter relationships. And so I worry about the world if we don't multiply public relations departments that do good that do well by doing good.
Yeah, and as a communicators, we have this enormous power and a big responsibility to be good as a communicators, as you mentioned. Talk responsibility and not spread misunderstandings or fake news, right? Okay, well, thank you so much, Daniel, for your time, knowledge, and advice. Any social media channels that you want to share with us? Where can we find you?
Well, right now, the best way to find me is torchiacom.com. That's our website, or LinkedIn. And my name is Daniel Torchia on LinkedIn.
Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, everyone, and see you on the next Professionals and Coffee Chat. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and social media networks, which are in the description below this video. And please join us to do your own virtual coffee chat like I did today with Daniel Torchia. Thank you, Daniel, and bye-bye.